Good morning.
Hello.
We're back with another guest today. This is somebody who I've known for a very, very long time, and I look up to her and appreciate her and all the things that she's doing in our recovery world here in our small little town. So, this is Linda Teague, and you can go ahead and introduce yourself
All
and
right.
talk
Well,
about.
my name is Linda Teague, and I am a person in long-term recovery, among many other things. But what that means to me is that I haven't had a problematic relationship with mind-altering substances since 11, 14, 16. And that that is the biggest accomplishment of my entire lifetime. Um, you asked me a little bit about addiction
Mhm.
and I just we have to start with the story because for a long time I didn't understand what my problem was.
As many people do.
Right. So, when I think about addiction, I was born. I was born to be an addict. Number one, because genetically I'm predisposed, which was a big secret. Don't tell anybody that we have addiction, or it was, alcohol use in our
Mhm.
family. And I was raised in a very chaotic, violent, hectic house that was um, covered by the mask of middle class white privilege. And
Got it.
um, we moved all the time when I was little, and we moved away from my extended family when I was very young. So we didn't live by my cousins. We didn't live by my grandparents, and my dad was adopted. So he didn't have a family. And so every 3 years we'd move, and I would be the new kid. Well, about junior high, um, you know, we started experimenting with drugs and alcohol, mainly alcohol. And I don't know about you guys, but it was served in my home daily, every day. I
Same.
Same.
did not know that there were people that did not drink alcohol.
I
she was
just said that.
She was just talking about
Yeah.
this.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought everyone drank at 5 o'clock, the world stops and we start drinking. You know what I mean? And that's where kind of all the chaos ensued, was around the dinner table and how many gin and tonics, don't know. And so I was a really angry, rebellious teenager. And I ran with that for a long, long time. I managed to go to college. I've got two college degrees. Um, I'm a physician assistant. But underneath all that, I was a very, very successful alcoholic for a long
So it's like a
time.
functioning
I
addict
was a
they talked about.
functioning alcoholic.
That's what my
Absolutely.
mom used to always say. I'm a functioning alcoholic.
Yes, yes. Until I wasn't.
Hmm.
Yep.
And for me, that was about 40. And I'm telling you what, it felt like somebody stepped on the gas. And it wasn't wine anymore, it wasn't martinis anymore. I mean, I was coming home from the grocery store with bottles of vodka. And that's what I drank, you know? And I went through a divorce and all the horrible things that happened to us. We lose custody of our children. And I couldn't hold a job. And I just kept getting sicker and sicker. And the thing of it is that where do you go? In a small town in rural Arizona, if you go to, I would end, I would get so desperate you'd end up in the emergency room.
Yeah.
And there are no services there for people like us. And in fact, our emergency room doesn't prescribe Suboxone. Not because they can't, simply because they choose not to.
Quickly for
Crazy.
people that don't know, what is that?
Oh, Suboxone is the gold standard, along with methadone, for treating opioid use disorder. And so the end of my story is long term. I went to 4 rehabs. I was on a ventilator for 10 days because I got
Wow.
pneumonia and sepsis because I was so skinny. And um, I was dying. I was dying of alcoholism. And my story includes prescription drugs simply because I had access. I didn't need to buy drugs on the street. You know what I mean? I got my drugs at the pharmacy. So, um, you know, I don't know. Everybody comes to that fork in the road, and I can't live with it, and now I can't live without it.
Mm.
And one day I saw this vision, and I knew that if I didn't stop drinking, that I was going to lie down in bed and I was going to drink myself to death.
Do you
And
think
so
everybody has that
I don't
moment?
know. I don't know the answer to that. You know what to me it is? You have to want it more than you want anything else. More than you want money. More than you want anything else. You have to want to get better. Because we can all quit drinking, right? Or we can all quit using dope for 2 weeks or a month. But it's staying in recovery is the issue. And it's not a state, you don't wake up one day and, oh my God, I'm better. God, I quit drinking, I'm better.
Oh,
It's
thank
a
goodness.
journey.
Yeah, if it were
It
that
solved
easy.
everything.
If it were that easy.
Right. And if it was easy, everybody would do it. But it's 1 in 10. 1 in 10 get this chance. And so the next day I called my psychiatrist on the phone, who I'd been lying to, of course, about everything. And I had to ask him. He was a psychiatrist and he was in recovery from opioid use disorder. And I had to ask him, please put me on Suboxone. I'm going to die. This is the last ditch. This is the last stop. I've got to do something or I'm going to die. And he did. And it saved my life. That
How long were you on the Suboxone?
I'm still on it.
So is this like a forever thing for people,
I
or
don't
You could
know.
taper.
It just depends. You can taper off, but here's my thing. That drug saved my life. I don't have any side effects from it. I never wake up and all of it's gone. You know what I mean? I don't abuse it, and it helps me to function. I don't know what it is about my brain, but I'm functional. I have a job. You know what I mean? I have relationships with people. I have a life now. I'm not surviving anymore. Now I'm living. And it just helped me because what was going on in my brain was 24/7, and it was I want, I want, I want, I want, I want. And it didn't matter what the consequences were because I was going to get it. And when I started Suboxone, that voice in my head stopped long enough for me to get better. Because it doesn't happen overnight, right? It takes 2 years for your brain to heal.
Yeah. I heard that, because I went through recovery as well, as you know, and I heard that, like, the amount of time you use, it takes double that to kind of come out of it.
like
So, like,
undo what you've done?
if you use for 7 years like I did, 14
Yeah.
years later, you will
Right.
be able to.
Right. Well, I think
Function,
that I
I
stopped
guess.
maturing when I started drinking, and that was in junior
Yeah.
high. You know, I was a victim of a dysfunctional family, and I carried that into being an adult. I was a victim, and things just happened to me. Do you know what I mean? I didn't have any boundaries. I didn't know how to set any boundaries. I didn't know what a boundary was. I was just, here's the way I operated, that as long as you didn't talk about my alcohol or drug use, pretty much you had carte blanche. I was going to give you the shirt off my back as long as I got that. And that's the way the relationships worked. You know what I mean? Is that don't touch this and I'll do this. But anyway, it's the only reason I'm sitting here talking to you today is because I'm in recovery.
Yeah. And you've done so many beautiful things with your recovery. I would say you helped the community out. So could you tell
Well,
us a little bit of what
yeah.
the things that you've done for our community
Yeah.
within your
So,
recovery?
I was a PA in our community for 25 years. So, I'm familiar with the medical community, and I just know people in the community. So and I'll just say this: I lost my license to practice medicine because of drugs and alcohol. And when you're in the monitoring program for the Board of Medical Examiners, if you're sick enough that you need to be on Suboxone, then you're too sick to be a doctor. That's not the way it is anymore, since the American Medical Association came out in support of practitioners who are stable on Suboxone. So anyway, my little plug is that's my next thing, is looking into getting that back. But in the meantime, we can't leave recovery alone. So anyway, I took a hiatus. I had to just stop what I was doing, and I got a job at home. My daughter was a senior in high school, and I reviewed disability cases, and I did it for 3 years, for my first 3 years of recovery. And what that allowed me to do was to recover. Stress and trying to be in recovery didn't work well for me. I couldn't do that all at the same time. Take care of everyone else and try to take care of me. It didn't work. So I did that for about 3 years, and then I got a job with the Navajo County Health Department, and I was running their overdose prevention program. And it was really awesome because they had the funding for about a year, and they really didn't know what to do with it. But what this funding came with was an endless supply of Narcan from the Arizona Department of Health. And we flooded this county with Narcan. When I left, I was giving out probably 1,000 doses a month. So
and can you explain to the listeners what Narcan is if they don't know?
So anyway, needless to say is that we're talking about fentanyl. And fentanyl is an opiate that, causes overdoses and is, a big problem in our community. I mean, not only are people using it, people also are ingesting it unwittingly because they don't know it's in the dope. So I tell everybody, I mean, even if it's cocaine, people have died from overdoses from cocaine.
We had a friend a few years ago. Yeah, she was out partying, just thought she was doing cocaine, and she died of an overdose of fentanyl. It's crazy.
So yeah,
she didn't even use drugs hardly.
Right?
That was just like that's my birthday party thing. Not condoning that for anybody, but just
Well, overdose does not just affect people with substance use disorder. It affects recreational users of drugs. So number one, you've got to have Narcan in case there is fentanyl and someone has an overdose. And two, the other thing we started doing was handing out fentanyl test strips so that, if you're at a party and you're going to do dope, that you check and see what you're doing. And that's just, we take risks all the time, don't we? Every time we drive in the car, I put my seatbelt on. You know what I mean? And the reality is that people use drugs, and Americans are huge consumers of illicit drugs, and that the government is not going to regulate our supply, and so your best defense is to try to know what's in what you're buying, right? And if you can't know everything that's in there, at least can you test and see if there's fentanyl in there or not.
So to circle back on the Narcan, the Narcan is basically a drug. It's basically a a medication, not even a prescription, that you can give somebody who's overdosing.
Who's overdosing, right? And it reverses the overdose for 30 to 90 minutes. Fentanyl sticks around forever. So people really need to go to the hospital. People who use drugs don't like to go to the hospital. I'm still traumatized by the hospital. I hate to go to the hospital.
But if it's your life,
Well, or the other thing, someone needs to sit with them then. You know what I mean? For a couple hours and make sure that they don't overdose again.
So if you're unwilling to go to the hospital, at least make sure somebody's watching.
Somebody hangs with them and stays awake. Yeah.
And I'm sure some people are listening and they're like, wow, there's a huge stigma with substance use, and people are likely listening to this right now and saying, why would you guys even want to help them? Or why would you even want to do this?
And that was my thought process when we had this initial
Yeah.
conversation to plan this podcast. I was like, why? Like, if you're going to do drugs, let them do drugs. They're doing it to themselves.
But there's a huge outreach, I think, in substance use, and in the mental health world is a baby. It is a baby.
Yeah.
People are barely learning about mental health and substance use and
Right.
what it is, and abstinence versus recovery and things like
Right.
that. And so, as you're listening to this and your mind is saying, just let them use.
Yeah.
They're going to be an addict anyway.
Why
Like,
should we
just-
care about these
why
addicts?
should we care? There is something that you and I have talked about, and something that I'm very passionate about because my background is in substance use too. It's harm reduction.
Oh,
Can
yeah.
you talk a little bit about that? And
Yeah, this really changed my perspective hearing you talk about this.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to touch on.
So, harm reduction. Well, first of all, let's just go back, and that is that substance use disorder is a disease. I wasn't bad. I was sick. I was sick, and so here's a story I like to tell when I talk about substance use disorder and to medical professionals. And I give an example, and I say, Betty came back to the family practice clinic today, and the medical assistant noticed that she was eating Burger King in the waiting room. Do you know that last time she was in, they told her if she didn't go on a diabetic diet and lose weight that she was going to get diabetes. And so, Betty comes back, we check her blood sugar, and sure enough, we told her, you've got to change the way you eat or you're going to get diabetes. And so, you know what they did to poor Betty is they told her that every day you're going to have to come in and get your insulin now because we can't trust you not to eat sugar if you're not here. The other thing you need to do is you're going to have to sign up for some educational classes about diabetes twice a week in order to get your medication. And, we're going to have to sign you a home monitor that comes into the home and looks for illicit substances. Can you imagine that? Or can you imagine going to the emergency room and having hypertension and they saying, we could treat that, but we just don't.
Because you did this to yourself.
yeah,
Because they choose not to.
yeah.
There is so much stigma around it. And let's just talk about the language. Let's talk about clean and dirty.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? No, I was never dirty. And I'm certainly not clean now. As you can see, I just came in from the garden. But the language around substance use disorder must change, and we must start treating it as a disease and not bad behavior or that someone is inherently bad.
Or they're
it's
just weak.
Yes.
I think that's a big, you're
Yes.
just being weak. Like, suck it
Yes.
up. And I
Yes.
think that what I wasn't thinking about when I had that same perspective is that some of these people are learning these habits, these disorders as children or teenagers. Like you said, you grew up in this dysfunctional household, didn't know
Exactly.
that it wasn't normal. My
Right.
partner started doing drugs when he was in junior high, didn't know anything about drugs. And for me to say, don't care about these people, if somebody hadn't cared about him, he wouldn't be alive today.
Exactly.
And I think
People-
that's what we forget sometimes.
Yeah,
We
and-
zoom out and we don't give these people a
Yeah.
face.
People who use drugs are not disposable. And that's what I try to, the message is that we're losing valuable members of our community that could easily be saved with the prescription of Suboxone, because when you walk out of the ER with a prescription of Suboxone, it has Narcan in it. And guess what? You don't die of an overdose. And we simply must start treating people. And people who with substance use disorder are in crisis. And people in crisis need to be seen in the emergency room. It has to be on demand, and it has to be available to everyone, not just 10%. 10% of people ever get offered. So, do you want Suboxone? 10% of people. Think about me. I had to ask my psychiatrist who's in recovery to prescribe it for me.
Yeah.
And you
And
knew
so-
about it because you're in the medical field. Some people don't
Exactly.
even know that that's a thing.
Exactly. And we do, in our community, we do have a methadone clinic.
Yep.
It has really funky hours, but we do have one. And I mean, people with opioid use disorder must be treated, you know. And the other thing is within the recovery community itself, we need to stop stigmatizing people who are on medications for opioid use disorder. Those people are in recovery and those people are sober. Nobody gets to define my recovery. I define my recovery, and I know I'm in recovery because my behavior demonstrates that every day. I don't need to tell anyone I'm in recovery. If I wasn't in recovery, you'd know.
Right. I always use, because I work in a social working field, and so I always tell people, you know, like I have coworkers or employees who ask me, like, how do you know if they're on drugs? And I say, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's a duck. Like, point blank.
Right. Well, and if it's crazy, because here's
Yeah.
the thing, I was mentally ill. I was not in touch with reality. And here's the thing about it too, is when you start substance use disorder at a young age in a really chaotic environment, I couldn't trust my perception of reality. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That and if you're using alcohol, causes blackouts. So 50% of the time, hell, I couldn't remember anything. And that is part of recovery, is to be able to trust your perception of the world and that it's accurate and you're able to maneuver in that sphere. Because I really believe that, you know, and especially particularly when people are unhoused, these people are not going to recover. You know, you have to have some stability
Yeah.
in your life.
And so you had said something. You said that you were mentally ill, and I also like to always tell people that using substances is the coping skill.
It's a coping
There is
mechanism.
something else in there. Your traumas, your triggers, your
There's something underlying
there's something
it
underlying in
Yes.
your mental health that is causing you to use this as
Yeah.
a coping skill.
to try to make it go away, or to try not
Right.
to feel it, or to try
Well,
to
that's
ignore
and
it.
that's what I say too. It's like the chicken or the egg. Since I started drinking when I was 12, you know what I mean? Is that I don't know if I was anxious and depressed first, clearly, because I wanted to drink, but I mean, I can remember clearly taking that first drink and thinking to myself, "Oh my God, I have just found the answer to all of my problems. This is great. This is great." Yeah. And I don't think other people feel like that when they have a beer, do they? I don't know.
I don't know. Some people might.
Yeah,
I
some
feel like
people
I
might.
feel like a lot of people use it as a coping mechanism.
I
Like,
feel
oh,
like-
I'm stressed. I just need to unwind. Or,
Yeah.
oh, you know, I feel anxious, and I'm around people I don't know, so it's gonna help me. You
Yeah.
know, there's all kinds of excuses and things that we're trying to cover up, or
Well, and I think for particularly women, you know what I mean, is that we're raising kids. And I mean, I was crazy in my 40s. So I work full time. I had a daughter. We had horses. I mean, it was just nonstop. And, you know, particularly in my case with opiates, it's like the more energy I could have, you know what I mean, the faster I could go and the more I could work. And, you know, I just feel like there's so much pressure on women, and that we use it as an escape, you know, to check out.
yep.
Because when I was drinking, I didn't drink until typically when I got home from work. So I wasn't drinking during the day. But you know, that was it. You know,
That was enough.
right?
Yeah.
Well, in the end, I mean, that was the last day I drank. Is I woke up in the morning and I started drinking vodka out of a bottle, 7 o'clock in the morning. Like, wow, is that the best choice you got today?
Hmm.
But that was
Yeah.
really, I mean, that was really like, that really spoke to me about the writing on the wall and where I was headed.
So with I want to circle back to harm reduction
Oh,
because I
yeah.
also want to talk about what that looks like and how the recovery world is changing with that
Right.
thought process and
Right.
harm reduction
Yeah,
as a
that's true.
resource.
So, needless to say, especially in a small community, if you're going to get into recovery, where are the recovery people? They're in AA and they're in NA. And certainly that is where I started
Hmm.
because, parents reach out to me and I always say, you can't do this alone. You will not be able to do this alone. I
You need
couldn't do it
support.
alone. Yeah. And I'll take that one step further. I I contend that addiction is about isolation and recovery is about connection. Because when I at the very
Hmm.
end, I don't know about you guys, I was alone.
Yeah.
It wasn't fun. It was just me and the booze and the pills.
Do you think that's one of the reasons it's harder for people to break the cycle of addiction because they feel like they're alone?
Well, and if you go to the emergency room, they just smack you down. And when you get smacked down enough, you stay down.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And I don't
That
know
hurts my
many
heart.
people in recovery who have not entertained suicide. I was hospitalized 4 times
Hmm.
because addiction is a disease of self-loathing.
Yeah.
And in order to get better, number one, you have to learn how to love yourself, but you need other people to show you that. And that's why we must have a community and a community where you can walk in. And I mean, I still go to AA. There's nothing better than walking in a room with a bunch of people that you don't have to explain anything to. They get it.
Mm.
Like, you can say whatever you need and no one is surprised. But that is, we need we need resources where people aren't traumatized when they walk in the door. That when, so here's an example. This is what we need in our community. We need a recovery community organization that is staffed and led by people with lived experience who are also peers. So that when someone comes in the door, somebody who with lived experience says, "How can I help you with your recovery today?"
Mm.
Not, "What are you doing here again?"
Yeah.
Because this is the disease of relapse. You know what? Nobody wanted to see me come rolling in that emergency room again. I didn't want to be there. But if you don't give anyone to go, at people somewhere to go, they will come back. You know
So
what I
is
mean?
there, yeah, definitely. Is there places outside of our community or even in different states like the ones you're describing, this
Yes.
recovery
So on the
community?
East Coast, recovery community organizations are the norm. We just haven't caught up with it yet here. I'm involved with this group, and it's called Mobilize Recovery.
Oh,
And
yes.
yes, and Faces and Voices of Recovery. And there's so many resources there, um, and ideas about lived experience. That's the other thing, is that the medical community doesn't understand the value of lived experience. You know what I mean? Like the psychiatrist who really saved me was in recovery.
Right.
He got it. You know what I mean? I didn't have to explain it to him. I've seen psychiatrists that have told me maybe I needed to go to the mall and go to the makeup counter. That might make me better.
What?
Yes.
Oh my
Seriously.
gosh.
Wow.
You should go over too. It was in Flagstaff. But I mean, so you need someone who understands, right? And
Hmm.
and here's the other thing. We don't have enough mental health professionals to treat all the mental illness in the United States. We
Amen to
don't.
that.
Amen.
So that's the role of people with lived experience. That's where peers come in. I mean, it's just modeled after AA. You know, it's one person showing another, taking somebody by the hand and saying, just follow me. Just follow me. Trust me, follow me, and we can get you through this. But I don't, I don't, I could not have done it alone. And I still don't do
Same.
it alone.
So, is it accurate to say do no harm kind of means stop making these people even worse than they already are?
Exactly.
Like,
So
care?
here, so 65% of people in prison are mentally ill. That's what we do with people who are mentally ill now. We just put them in prison, you know? Where else would they go? We don't have any state hospitals anymore,
We
or
just
they're
contain them
living
and we don't help them.
exactly.
Hmm.
Um, so anyway, harm reduction is it's a movement to number one give people the voice of lived experience um, space, and to two is that people use drugs. We know that people use drugs, right? And that is not going to stop. But we also know now, too, that people develop substance use disorder and that those people are sick. I was sick, and that these people need help. And and these people, so 65% of these people are probably been traumatized. So when we put these people back in jail for, using or selling drugs, we just re-traumatize them all over again. So harm reduction basically says, whether we like it or not, people are going to use drugs. And if people are going to use drugs, then we're going to give them the resources. Like people choose to drive cars every day, so we put seatbelts in cars so you don't fly out of the car when you get in a car accident. So why don't we give these people some resources? So number one, if you're going to use drugs, let's show you how to do it safely. You know? Number two is let's let you test your drugs and see what's in there so you have the most information that you can. And that you have Narcan so if someone has an overdose. And most importantly is that I see you and I treat you as a human being. And that you're not a piece of garbage and you're not waste and you're valued and the world needs you. I'm sorry you're sick, you know? So, and, not everyone gets better, but I will tell you that, like, let's say, for example, I'm talking about a syringe service exchange program, obviously, giving people clean needles, clean pipes, talking to them about giving them sterile water so they're not pulling water up out of a bathroom sink.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And talking to them about how to stay alive because everybody deserves a second chance.
Does it include talking to them about working through their stuff so that they can get better?
Bits and pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's my thing is, we do no harm and I want to keep you safe. And that could mean, hey, how about let's prick your finger and test you for HIV and Hep C. What if we could do that? What if we could treat that? Then you might feel better. So I think I think for anyone, it's a road, it's a journey. And maybe the first step is someone treats them like a human being.
Hmm.
It says, I
And
see you. Go
Yeah.
ahead,
So
Deanna.
I've had experience with these harm reduction or mobilized clinics because I did live on the East Coast for a few years.
Yeah.
And I did work in a mental health clinic for a short time while I was there. So one of the things that they consistently spoke about is when patients or clients come into the mobilized unit, while they're giving them clean syringes or while they're getting like an HIV test or getting fluids or whatever they need at that moment, you have that opportunity of time to plant the seed. And that's really what you're talking about is
Yeah.
While they're in your facility,
Right.
you make the most out of that time.
Right.
And whatever you can tell them in that short amount of time that they're there is what really will make the difference for them.
Yeah.
It's keeping people safe. Yes, that's the first part is keeping
Right.
the use at as safe of a level as
Safe
it
as
can be.
possible, right.
Yeah. but also taking that time with them to really plant those seeds and have those conversations. And one of the mobile nurses actually said that she would find that people would want to just come in and talk. Like, they would want to, like, they're like, yeah, we probably do need some, a couple of needles or whatever, but they would
Mostly
come
I just
in.
wanted to talk to you.
Yes, they would come in
Yeah.
and just want to have a conversation with these people.
See,
and
Well,
so,
can
I
you
think-
imagine when you're living on the street, people are repulsed by you. You know what I mean? And to have someone talk to you and see you. The other thing is that you give them hope. And that's what I didn't have. I didn't have any hope that anything was ever going to get better. And I didn't even use that word in my vernacular. I didn't have any hope. I didn't have any faith. I didn't believe in anything. And I think if we can plant the seed of hope, that's a win right there.
In the with the risk of sounding a little bit harsh, I would say what's coming up for me when I'm listening to this is I love the idea of this do no harm thing, but I don't think I would be supportive of it unless there were people there that were going to talk to them too.
yeah, and
Oh,
that's
You know,
what it
yeah.
is.
like, but you'd have to be trained in a way, like, because not just anybody could do that. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And I think that
People
those
with
two
lived
things would have to go.
experience,
Yeah.
You know what
I think those
mean?
things should go hand in hand. You know.
Those are the people who need to be handing out the syringes, and not necessarily. That may not be me. The street wasn't my deal, so I can do that, but I didn't have that experience. And it's the same thing with the criminal justice system. Is that let's put peers in there, people who survived this and actually made positive change after a really horrible experience.
But you know
But you know
went
what? The other thing is, just on that note, Leanna, is
yeah,
that
go for it.
overdose prevention centers or safe consumption sites are coming. So there's
That's
one
awesome.
in New York City. It's on point, and there's 2 locations. But Rhode Island has just passed this huge thing, and they are building. It's a safe consumption site, but it's attached to all the resources, like the medical resources.
It's like
So
one
there's
big
mental
hub.
health care, family practice. It's one-stop shopping. And that's what these people need. They can't function in the world. They can't navigate the medical system. We need to help them navigate that.
I want to say that when you see that there is a need that is not being met and we have these discussions about it, maybe the reason you're seeing that the need is needing to be met is because maybe you're supposed to be the one that does something. And I'm just saying, between the two of you, lived experience and knowledge and expertise and management experience, I'm just saying that maybe that could be something, if you two put your heads together, that you could bring to our community. And it would
It's-
solve a lot of problems for not only the people in the community, but
Yeah.
for yourselves, I
Yeah.
think, too.
Yeah. It's the answer. Harm reduction is the answer. And whether or not people are ready, it is the answer. We have to start treating people like they're sick people and not bad people.
Yeah.
Ooh, that gave me goosebumps.
I work with the legal system in the dependency courts for social work, and
Yeah.
I went to a conference a year ago. I just went to the same conference, but the one a year ago had a guest speaker who was a judge from Tennessee. And what she is doing in her courtroom is she's utilizing that safe culture, the safe practice culture, and this is safety science. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that or if you guys have heard of that, but it's basically making a safe space for people to be while they're going through something like dependency court, trying to get their kids back or getting their kids taken away and things like that. And I just thought it was a really cool idea that, like, what if every courtroom, or what if every police department, or what if
Right.
every emergency room, like you said, was practice that safety science culture?
Right.
I wonder how that would change things in the substance and addiction world.
Well, I can tell you this, and that is I spent a lot of time at the Navajo County Jail. And they understand that they are not going to arrest their way out of this situation. So there are some peers now that are going up to the jail, but if you arrest one person, 5 others pop up. I mean, and people are not going to stop using drugs. Putting people in jail does not make people stop using drugs. They just come out, and you know what the number one cause of death of people leaving America's jails and prisons are?
Overdose.
That's correct.
I have a brother in prison. He said it's easier to get drugs in prison than it is to get drugs outside of prison.
Yeah.
So.
The other thing I did when I was at the county is that every inmate now that leaves the Navajo County Jail gets a bag with Narcan and fentanyl test strips.
That's awesome.
They got to have Narcan. You know what I mean?
Mm.
These people they've been there for, that's like the holding tank. It's not prison. You're just sent there to linger till they figure out where you need to go.
Yeah, and it's not like, oh, here, permission to go do drugs. It's like, this is what the facts are saying,
Right.
that most of these people are overdosing.
Oh, yeah.
And
Well,
this way you can maybe not die today because we haven't
Exactly.
actually helped
Because
you.
we just gave you some Narcan. But it's interesting up there. I would meet people who would be like coming out of prison and they didn't know how to use a cell phone. How do you go out in the world?
Yep.
You were arrested. There was, you don't know how to use a computer. How would you apply for a job?
Yeah, you need some kind of skills. Like,
Yeah.
you need to get caught up on what you've missed
Yeah.
while you've been gone.
We do have a
Yeah.
re-entry program
Yes.
in our community that's pretty well known.
Robust.
Yes.
And they do amazing work. They also
do.
have sober living homes.
Yes, and that's actually programs that I utilize.
Yes.
That I utilize for my clients or my clients utilize.
There's a
Right.
sober living program through the Re-Center, which
Well,
is
that's what we're
supported
talking
through-
about.
Oh, is it the same
Yeah.
one?
Yeah.
She works with them too on this little side note.
I do some volunteering with some of the moms over
Yeah.
there.
Oh, yeah. The
Yeah.
Mama's program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great program.
It is
It
so
really
good.
is.
It's so
But
good
see-
and
That's
and we've
another.
done-
That's the other. That's one peer. That's one person helping another. It's the same thing. Do you know what I mean? Is that
Yeah.
I had to have another woman show me how to show me coping skills because I did not have any. And actually, I had a psychiatrist say that to me once. She said, you have very poor coping skills. And I'm like, well, I know of 2. One is drugs, and the other is alcohol.
you're like, it's working pretty good for me.
Unfortunately, I'm now in this room with you without anything sharp and no shoelaces, but here I am.
So maybe they weren't serving me too well, but
Yes. No, they were.
what
It
what
was
coping
what I
skills did she
knew.
teach you though? Like, that's an important topic I think to touch on, because if you're not going to cope with drugs and alcohol, what do you cope with? How do you cope?
You know what? And I mean, it's really true. I mean, there is a lot of truth at Alcoholics Anonymous, and that is that it is just one day at a time. It is. And here's the thing for me is that I should be dead. I should not be here. And that every day is a bonus day. You know what I mean? I shouldn't be here. And so I don't live in the future anymore, and I certainly can't live in the past, and that leaves me smack dab in today. And that's not a bad place to be. I don't worry like I used to worry anymore. And of course, when you're an addict and alcoholic, you got to control everything, because you got to control, when am I going to get this, when am I going to do that. I had a busy schedule. I don't know about you ladies.
Life is busy.
Yeah. And to just show you how to live without drinking every day, And it was slow and monotonous, but it was basically, I would say to myself, okay, you know what? This is what I did yesterday, and I stayed sober. You know what I mean? How can I do that again today? And I don't have to spend as much time doing that today. But what I still do today is that I still respond to life in the same way as as a little girl sometimes and their trauma responses. And so here's an example. I went to a concert in my community, and of course, it was a Jimmy Buffett like tribute thing, and so everyone was drinking. And somebody came up to me, it was one of my neighbors, and asked me if I wanted a shot. And so, of course, I'm already on edge because I'm there, and everyone's drinking, and I'm just, And she said, "Oh, do you want a shot?" And I'm like, "No, I don't drink. Ever."
Ever.
But if I wasn't an alcoholic, so I've been traumatized by alcohol.
Yeah.
That's like a big fucking red flag. No, I don't drink ever. You know what I mean? But that's a trauma response. That's old behavior. And those are the things I think we learn as we stay in recovery longer, is what makes us tick and why we do what we do, and how to be happy despite that. Right?
Work past all that, yeah.
I
Yeah.
hear what you're saying with this whole being around people drinking thing. I've recently, this last year, I've taken a sabbatical from drinking. And
Oh.
when I'm around people that are drinking, I feel uncomfortable. I'm trying not to. I'm really trying to be like, oh, I can be chill. I can totally relax and it's fine. But the whole vibe is different. And I'm on a different level than the other people around me.
Yes.
And I know that I have like this, I've been messed up by it. Like I'm messed up,
Yeah.
and not by me personally, but by my family history. Like I was
Yeah.
never an alcoholic, but they all were, and it's done something to my brain, and I'm desperately trying to fix it.
Exactly. And you know what? That is the truth, is that the alcoholic gets all the attention, but every single person orbiting in their little orbit is just as sick.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, we all have our
And-
stuff.
Yeah. And so I really think of myself as my family still drinks. Every occasion we get together, alcohol is served. It starts 2 hours before the party, and then some piece of meat rolls out of the oven at 6 or 7. I don't know. But is that we're generational cycle breakers. Is that number one? I talk about addiction and alcohol. It's like at this party, I want to say to anyone, hey, if you're in this room and you have a drink in your hand and you're related to an alcoholic, please raise your hand.
I like everybody's gonna raise their
Everyone.
hand.
No one's talking about it. We're just
Yeah.
serving, opening more bottles of wine. And, it's a learned behavior.
My mom
And-
died of alcoholism, and they
Is
were
that right?
opening bottles at her funeral. My
Ah.
cousin wore a T-shirt that said "Shut up, liver, you're fine." Like it's a
But-
whole thing.
So you see the sickness, and they're willing to protect that. And you know what? To be honest with you, I think for a lot of people it's easier because it's really
yeah.
hard to change.
It is.
And
Yeah,
so-
it's really hard.
If it
Yeah.
were easy, everybody would do it. That's what we said earlier. Like,
And-
Well,
Right.
and there's no clear-cut instructions. Everybody's journey is going to be different because everybody's trauma is different.
Yeah. And the definition of what it means to be an alcoholic, do you know what I mean? Is my life might have been perfectly acceptable to someone. It wasn't to me, but
Yeah,
it
you weren't
might-
drinking till 5. That sounds functional to me.
I
My
had a
parents were
job.
drinking at 5 a.m.
Yeah. But it is, and that we start talking about these things and we start talking about dysfunction in family, because dysfunction in family is seeing the problem and ignoring it. If you don't talk about it, it simply doesn't happen. And
That's
that's
so
the way
true.
it works in my family.
Mhm.
Just don't talk about it. It didn't happen.
Do you talk about it now with your family?
I don't really have a relationship with my family anymore because of that.
It's been hard. It's been too hard to.
We don't, they're still sick.
Yeah.
I don't know how to be in that world anymore. And I can no longer be quiet because people are dying in silence.
Mhm.
And they're condoning that. There's
Yeah.
people in my family that are sick. And if you don't do anything and you don't talk about it, it just keeps going and it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
And, Leanna babysat my daughter.
I did.
And you know what? I want my daughter to know that strong women get back up. And even when we have really bad problems, that we keep going. And you know what? We talk about it. And nothing is off the table. That's the way it has to be. I mean, she was traumatized by my alcoholism.
Mm-hmm.
I was the mom that, she couldn't wake me up, and she'd call people. I can't wake my mom up. That's trauma. But the way to avoid not doing that again is to talk about it.
Right.
And I think, especially my parents' generation really cared a lot about what other people thought about them and being middle class, and just simply wasn't allowed. You know what I mean? Especially if it's something with mental health. And it's hard to talk about it. And that's why, they served wine. I hear you. It's craziness, right? It doesn't make any sense. She just died of alcoholism, and we're all standing there drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. So
and I was too. I don't want to say that I wasn't part of that. I was
Yeah.
definitely drinking at her funeral too. So I'm not
Yeah.
passing judgment on my family that I'm not already passing on myself. I just want to clear that up real quick.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
somebody said to me once about my family. She said, "Honey, if it's making you crazy, it probably is."
Makes so much sense.
That is a good quote right there.
Makes so much sense. So,
Right.
so to kind of wrap everything up, we've talked about harm reduction, we've talked about recovery, we've talked about the kind of progression of all of that.
And why people are
And
addicted.
why people are, yeah.
Right.
If somebody's listening to this right now and they are wanting to step into the recovery world, what pieces of advice would you give them and what directions would you send them?
Resources.
Yeah.
What resources do they
Yeah.
have?
So, definitely. So it all depends on what your definition of recovery is. Recovery isn't abstinence. It doesn't mean abstinence. To me, it means to stop doing things, stop hurting yourself. Like, I was a danger to myself, and I was a danger to other people. And is that how can we keep you safe right now? If you're shooting dope, let's give out the number for Never Use Alone. And that is 1-877-696-1996. And Never Use Alone answers the phone 24 hours a day. They'll stay on the phone with you while you're using. And if you become unresponsive, they'll call for help for you. So that's a great resource. Is that number one is let's keep you alive, okay? Get some Narcan, get some fentanyl test strips. And the other thing is that unfortunately in our community, we don't have any harm reduction sites. And we don't have a recovery community organization. But here, you can get free Narcan and free fentanyl test strips at the Navajo County Health Department. Just walk in and ask them for it. But I would suggest everybody has Narcan. And the other thing is that you don't have a cold. You may need professional help. I was really, really sick. I needed professional intervention to save my life. And for me, that meant Suboxone. I don't know what that means for you. But the biggest thing that we have to do and the hardest thing that we have to do is we have to ask for help. And I didn't want to ask anybody for help, but I
You wanted
needed
to
help.
do it on your own.
And know that there's people out there in the world who have been where you've been, and recovery is possible for anyone. And Alcoholics Anonymous is out there, Narcotics Anonymous. Find some people in recovery, some people with lived experience to help, because we can't do this alone. We need each other.
Amen
Amen.
to that. And I do want to just throw out some resources. We do have here in Navajo County or Show Low, we do have the Change Point Behavioral Health, and they do have a substance use inpatient program now.
Yes.
So that's really cool.
Yes.
That's helped a lot of people. And then at the methadone clinic that you had
Community
mentioned,
Medical Services.
Community Medical Services, thank you. I was going to
Yes.
ask the name. So
Yes.
they also talked to people about harm reduction techniques and recovery techniques as well. And
You know
they
what?
do
They actually have a
therapist
vending
there.
machine. And they have a vending machine. They have a harm reduction vending machine at CMS. And you don't have to be a patient. You can go into Community Medical Services and they'll let you go in the back and you can get stuff out of the vending machine. Syringes, Narcan, fentanyl test strips. I think there's even some personal hygiene products and things like that.
And also the recenter, like we had mentioned earlier.
Yes.
I think it's Monday through Thursday. You can take showers there. You can.
Yes.
They have hygiene kits and other like clothing. They have hot food served. Not every day, but most days. They have
Yeah.
food boxes. They have on Thursdays you can go there and they have somebody from DES there, somebody from Change Point
Yeah.
there, somebody from one of the local banks there to help with financing,
Yeah.
with finances and such. If
And you
need
can
that.
Google
So cool.
any of those same services for other communities if you're not near this community. Or,
Yeah,
Right.
they have a what is it? Arizona 211.
211.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Arizona 211 is that's for the state of Arizona, obviously.
Right.
And you can look at their website, and they have like a whole directory of resources for people.
Right.
So
Oh,
that's
that's
another
right.
one too.
Right. And if you're new to recovery, if you're thinking about recovery, if you're struggling, here's what I used to say to myself. I said it for 3 years, and it's really simple, and that is that if nothing changes, nothing changes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good, simple. Keep it simple, man.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know,
Keep it simple.
it's like what do you want your life to look like? And honestly, for me, it was, do you want to live? Do you want to live? Yes or no? Because for some people, for me, it wasn't a given. It could have gone either way, and that we need to instill hope in people. And if we can't help them, at least don't hurt them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that filled my cup.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on here and providing your expertise and your knowledge, like just sharing that with our community. I think it was really important, and I think that I just want you to know that we value you and we appreciate you.
Yes,
Same
you've
to
done
you.
some wonderful
And I'm
things.
thankful for your journey, because if you hadn't had this journey, you wouldn't have the knowledge that you have right now that
Yeah.
you're able to share with other people.
Yeah.
I always tell people, you've got a story to tell, and the world needs to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
We
So
need to tell the stories.
we do. And we need to share it with people that matter. Like, I think that it's not some kind of divine intervention if you're listening to this episode and have made it this far. I think that anybody who listens to this conversation right now needed to listen to it, and I hope that
Yeah.
the message finds you well, however it needs to.
Yeah.
Keep trying.
And brings you
Yeah.
hope.
Yes. Oh, I think that's a great note to end on, ladies.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Linda.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much, Linda. We really appreciate your time here, and I'm being drawn to communicate with you a little more on some of the recovery stuff up here.
Uh-huh.
So
So let
you'll
me
be
tell
hearing
you.
from me soon.
Yes. I took the summer off and worked in the garden department at Lowe's just because I was burnout. But I think this was my catalyst to get back on.
Cool.
There's no such thing as coincidence.
Yes.
It's time for harm reduction. The boxes are sitting in my living room, Leanna. Just need someone to take them out in the community.
Okay, well, we will be in touch for sure. And if anybody who's listening has a call like I am right now in real time to help,
Yes.
please get a hold of us.
Yes, our
Yeah.
email is, what is our email?
Growing up for adults 23
at
Outlook.
outlook.com.
Yes.
Love
And
it.
if people want to get a hold of you, I don't know if you want to throw your information out there or if you're called to,
Or they could go through us and we
or they can go through
Yeah.
us. Yeah.
For sure, for
That's
sure.
probably a
Yeah,
better
let's do
route.
that then.
You know, I'm an old lady, so I'm just on Facebook, but you can find me there under Linda Teague.
Okay, cool.
I'm not on
Awesome.
TikTok. I have a TikTok account because I want to see what my daughter sends me, but I don't know how to function in that environment.
Same.
That's okay. That's okay.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank
Awesome.
you guys
Well, thank
so
you
much.
so much.
We'll talk soon.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
hope you have a great day.
Bye, Linda.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.